everyone, and welcome to this week's Lunch and Learn. My name is Sally, and I'm the IEA Policy Manager here at Disability Employment Australia, and it's lovely to be here to host today's session. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which each of us are dialing in from today. For me, that's the Darkinjung people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Our Lunch and Learn sessions are delivered in partnership between the Centre for Inclusive Employment and Disability Employment Australia. The Centre for Inclusive Employment supports providers with practical resources, tools, and training to support the delivery of high quality employment services. And DEA is the national peak body representing disability employment providers. The centre is delivered as part of a national consortium. It's led by the Centre for Social Impact at Swinburne University, and the other members of the consortium are Disability Employment Australia, NDS, Inclusion Australia, Family Advocacy, and University of Melbourne. Today we are joined by Shannon Schedlich. She's the CEO of Siblings Australia, and the topic for our Lunch and Learn is the Sibling Effect. Before I hand over to Shannon, I did just want to let you know that there are captions available. Liv is going to pop the link for those into the chat. If you have questions, please pop them in the Q&A box or into the chat. I'll keep a record of those, and if there's time, we will discuss those at the end of the session. The webinar is being recorded, and a copy of that will be made available after today's session, along with any notes or resources that are shared. I will now hand over to Shannon to take us through today's session. Thank you, Shannon.
And thanks, Sally, and the Disability Employment Australia and the Centre for Inclusive Employment for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the lands of the Kaurna people on the Adelaide Plains. I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders past and present, and I recognise the ongoing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to lands, water, culture and community. I also want to acknowledge and respect the cultural authority of any Aboriginal people joining us today. I would also like to provide a brief visual description of myself for anyone who is blind or has low vision. I'm a middle-aged white woman with dark blonde hair that I'm wearing down. Today I'm wearing a green woolen jumper, and behind me is a white background with the logos of the organisations who are hosting today's event in the corner. For those of you who don't know Siblings Australia, we're the only national organisation dedicated to supporting siblings of people with disability, chronic illness and mental health challenges. We work across the lifespan, from young children who are beginning to understand their sibling experience, through to adults navigating changing family routines, future planning, and what it means to have one of the longest relationships in the life of a person with a disability. Our work includes direct support for siblings and families, resources and training for professionals, research, advocacy, and working alongside services and systems to better understand the sibling relationship. Importantly, everything we do is informed by siblings themselves. We have both an adult sibling consultative committee and a child sibling consultative committee who work alongside us to make sure that our advocacy, programs and priorities reflect real sibling experiences, not assumptions about what those experiences might be. And that is where I want to start today, because when we talk about employment outcomes for people with disability, we often talk about services, systems, providers, and formal supports. But there is another relationship that is often sitting there the whole time, sometimes for decades, shaping identity, confidence, expectations, and what someone believes is possible, and that is the sibling relationship. Before we talk specifically about employment, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about why the sibling relationship itself matters.
But as I was saying, I want to talk about the sibling relationship itself. Because often when we talk about family and disability systems, we're actually talking about parents. And of course, parents matter enormously. Parents are often the first advocates. They are the people navigating diagnosis, therapies, education systems, services, funding, appointments, and supports. But families are bigger than parents, and the sibling relationship is different. For many people, their relationship with their brother or sister will be the longest of their life. It often starts before friendships, before partners, and before formal supports. And for many siblings, it continues long after parents are no longer able to play the role they once did. But despite this, siblings have often been largely invisible in the systems built around people with disability. We see children as participants in families, but we don't often ask about their brothers or sisters in that family. We talk about supporting families, but we frequently mean supporting parents. And then, as people with disabilities move into adulthood, systems often move from focusing on parents to focusing on formal services. And siblings can remain somewhere in the middle, deeply connected, but rarely recognised. And this matters because sibling relationships are not just emotionally important. There is a growing body of research that tells us that the sibling relationships have a real impact across the lifespan. Researchers studying siblings of people with disability consistently highlight a few key themes. The first is longevity. Sibling relationships are often the longest family relationships any of us will ever have. They span childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and aging. And that means siblings often see transitions that no single service, professional, or system will ever see. The second is identity. Sibling relationships help shape how we see ourselves and our place in the world. That is true for siblings themselves, but it is also true for people with disabilities. Brothers and sisters often play an important role in building confidence, encouraging independence, and creating opportunities for ordinary life experience. The third is continuity. Because siblings often move through life alongside each other, they carry knowledge across systems that do not always communicate to each other. The school system, the health system, the disability system, employment services, and community. Those services and systems can sometimes see separate pieces of a person's life. Siblings often see the connection between those pieces. And finally, relationships matter because social connections matter. We know that people who have strong informal networks and stronger community connections have more opportunities. Not because family replaces formal supports, but because relationships create possibility. Most of us find opportunities through people, someone who encourages us to apply, or tells us about a role, or reminds us that we are good when we doubt ourselves. Someone who says, actually, I think you could do that. And those small moments matter, because employment pathways are not built through systems. They are built through confidence, relationships, expectations, and opportunity. What the research tells us is that sibling relationships are influential. They shape who we become, and that is true for all of us. Our brothers and sisters are often the first people we negotiate with, and the first people we argue with, the first people we learn fairness, compromise, jealousy, humour, and loyalty with, and they are often the people who see versions of us that nobody else sees. And that is exactly why this relationship can be so important to people with disability, because siblings often know their brother or sister outside of disability, outside of appointments, outside of plans and reports and assessments, because they know the person. They know their history, they know their personality, and they know what matters to them. And one of the things that siblings tell us again and again is they often feel they hold a piece of their brother or sister's story that nobody else has. Not because they know everything, and not that they should be responsible for everything, but because they have walked alongside that person through ordinary life, and the ordinary life matters. Because the goal of disability support has never been simply to build services around people. The goal is to support people to live lives to their fullest, with relationships, choices, contributions, lives with opportunity, and that includes employment. One of the privileges of my role at Siblings Australia is that I get to speak to siblings across the entire lifespan. I speak to young children who are just starting to understand that their family might look a little different from their friends' families. I speak to teenagers who are thinking about their own identity and future while also deeply loving and worrying about their brother or sister. I speak to adult siblings navigating changing roles as their parents age. And I speak to siblings who are looking over decades of walking alongside their brother or sister. And the one thing that strikes me again and again is that siblings are so often holding two things at once. They see the barriers, they know the challenges, they have often seen firsthand where systems have failed their brother or sister, but they also often hold this incredibly strong sense of possibility. They can tell you about the strengths that other people missed, the interests that nobody knows about, the moments where their brother or sister achieved something other people didn't expect. And I think that perspective is incredibly powerful because so much of disability employment is about seeing the possibility before it has been proven. It's about believing someone can succeed and then working out what supports, adjustments, and opportunities need to exist around them to make that happen. And I know I'm speaking to people today who understand the importance of employment. Everyone here knows that employment outcomes for people with disability in Australia are still not what we want them to be. For decades, we've talked about improving employment pathways. We have looked at policy reform, employer attitudes, workplace adjustments, service models, and funding structures, and all of those things matter, and they matter enormously. But I really want to focus today on us asking about another piece of the puzzle, because employment does not start with the job application. It doesn't start with an interview. It doesn't even start when someone walks into an employment service. Employment starts much earlier. It starts with expectation. It starts with whether someone grows up believing work is something that could be part of their future. It starts with whether the people around them ask, what do you want to do? What are you interested in? What kind of life do you want to build? And for many people with disability, those conversations happen long before a formal employment pathway begins. They happen around kitchen tables, or they happen in cars, or they happen through watching the people around them go about their own life transitions. And that is why the relationships around the person matter. Because before someone gets a job, they need the opportunities to imagine the job. They need people around them to see their strengths. They need people who recognise not just what supports they need, but what contribution they can make. And siblings can be a really important part of that ecosystem. When we talk about disability employment, we're not just talking about jobs. Employment is about so much more than just a position description or a pay slip. Employment can provide financial independence. It provides purpose, connection, identity, and belonging. It gives people opportunities to contribute, to grow, to take risks, to succeed, fail, and learn. And it is fundamentally connected to dignity. And siblings can be a really powerful partner in supporting that, because siblings often bring a slightly different lens. Parents play an absolutely critical role in the lives of people with disability. But it is also completely understandable that parents, after years of navigating systems, advocating, protecting, and sometimes fighting for their child, hold very real fears about risk. For many families, that protective instinct has been built from experience. Siblings often sit in a slightly different place. They are more likely to have grown up alongside their brother or sister, sharing experiences, negotiating, challenging each other, and imagining their futures together. And because of that, siblings often bring not only a focus on dignity, but a dignity of risk. They can be the people who gently raise the gaze, the people who say, why not? The people who see the possibility before the limitation. And that makes them an incredibly valuable partner when we're talking about employment. You'll all be familiar with the Australian Disability Strategy, and particularly the three employment policy priorities: increasing employment for people with disability, improving the transition of people with disability from education to employment, and strengthening financial independence for people. Sibling relationships have the potential to contribute to all three of these priorities. Why? Because the siblings often know the whole person. They have known their brother or sister across different ages, different environments, and different stages of life. They know what motivates them. They know what they're passionate about. They know the things that may never appear on a formal assessment or support plan. For some people with disability, siblings are also important communication partners. They may understand what is being communicated in ways that other people miss through history, context, behaviours, expressions, and years of shared experience. And the sibling relationship is different. Many relationships for people with disability can become vertical. professionals providing support, or parents providing care, or systems making decisions. Sibling relationships are much more horizontal. They are built on shared childhoods, family jokes, arguments, compromise, and growing up together. At their best, they are relationships for equality, and that matters. Because supporting someone into employment is not just about finding something they can do, it's about recognising who they are. The research tells us that siblings can contribute to employment outcomes in really practical ways. They can draw on their local knowledge and network to identify opportunities that might suit their brother or sister. They can help navigate and activate supports and systems. They can provide practical assistance, encouragement, and problem solving. And because sibling relationships often continue as parents age or pass away, they can be part of that long-term network that supports a person's goals across their life. But there is another piece in here too. Siblings are often living those same life transitions, getting their first job, moving out of home, building relationships, studying, and changing careers. Those ordinary milestones can sometimes act as a reminder to everyone around a person with a disability to keep imagining what is possible, to ask, why shouldn't this person have these opportunities? Why shouldn't this person grow? Why shouldn't this person take the same steps towards adulthood, identity, and independence? And sometimes there is a dignity that comes from having your sibling beside you in those moments, because your brother driving you to a job interview feels very different from your parent driving you. Your sister helping you pick an outfit for your first day at work feels different to a support worker doing it. Not because one relationship matters more than the other, but because those relationships have different meaning. And if we are serious about building employment pathways that see the whole person, we need to recognise the person who have often seen the whole person all along. But what does the sibling influence actually look like? Because when we talk about the sibling involvement, we're not necessarily talking about one big moment or one formal role. Often it's the small things that happen across a lifetime. Sibling relationships can influence expectations, they influence confidence, and they influence the informal networks around the person. They can help support transport logistics, decision-making, future planning, communication, and understanding the strengths, interests, and preferences of a person over their entire lifetime. And again, this is not about replacing the paid supports. It's not about shifting responsibilities onto families, but it is recognising that if the only people we build around a person are paid supports, then we are missing something really fundamental about human connection, because all of us rely on relationships. All of us rely on people who know us outside of our work, outside the services we use, and outside of one particular point in our lives. And we know that broader networks matter. They matter for safeguarding. They matter for opportunity. They matter for belonging. And they matter because opportunities so often come through connection. I want to spend a few moments now specifically talking about what siblings themselves have told us. And I want to pause here and acknowledge something important. Because when we talk about lived experience in the disability sector, we rightly centre the voice and experience of a person with a disability, and that must always remain central. But around many people with disability are other people who have often lived the experience of the systems, barriers, expectations, and change. And the siblings have their own distinct lived experience. Not the same experiences as their brother or sister, not a replacement for the voices of the person with a disability, but a different perspective that can help us understand the whole picture. Siblings often see the points where the systems connect or where they don't. They often see what happens after the appointments end, after the services leave. They see what happens when a goal written on paper meets the reality of everyday life. And one of the things we hear consistently from siblings is they often feel they are holding information that could help, but are not always sure where they fit. They don't want to take over. They don't want to speak for their brother or sister. And they don't want systems to assume that they are responsible. But they also don't want decades of knowledge, trust, and understanding to be ignored. And this is such an important distinction. Including siblings is not about asking, how could this person help us to deliver support? It's asking, is there a relationship here that matters to the person with disability, and are we recognising it? Because sometimes siblings will know something as simple as, he won't tell you he's nervous, he'll just tell you he doesn't want to go in. Or she loves being around people, but she needs a bit of time afterwards to reset. Or that job looks good on paper, but I know the environment is going to be overwhelming. Or you're asking what work she wants to do, but nobody has ever helped her believe that work was possible, and those insights matter, because employment outcomes are not only shaped by Skills and opportunities, they are shaped by the confidence and expectations I keep coming back to. They are shaped by whether the people around someone genuinely believe that is possible. In preparing for today, I reached out to our sibling community and asked them about employment, about what had worked and what hadn't worked, and what they wish services had understood. And one of the strongest messages that came through was the need to think more broadly about what meaningful employment actually looks like. Not asking what job can this person do, but asking what does this person love and what motivates them, what environments allow them to thrive, and what contributions do they want to make. Because meaningful employment might look different for different people. It requires creativity. It requires thinking laterally. It might require building opportunities around someone's strengths rather than trying to fit them into a pathway that already exists. And siblings often have had that understanding because they have seen those interests and strengths develop over years. One sibling we spoke to, who works in the disability sector, talked about supporting people to explore creative activities and interests that could become pathways towards employment. And she reflected that she wished the employment services supporting her own brother were able to bring that same level of creativity, to look at what genuinely interested him and build from there. Siblings were also very clear about something else. Employment needs to be employment. It should not simply become a replacement for day activities or somewhere to go. People with disability deserve opportunities that recognise their skills, their contribution, and their potential. I want to share one example from a sibling who asked to remain anonymous. She reflected that if an employment agency working with her brother had reached out and included her perspective, she believes an entirely different outcome would have been possible, but she was never part of those conversations. She wrote, "My brother had supported employment positions for 4 years, 1 day a week. He was ultimately asked to leave due to behavioural challenges, and it was no longer deemed a suitable workplace. My experience supporting him and my family to have conversations with him about work, in particular why he was being asked to leave, highlighted that I think there was a lack of understanding from employers who mean well about the ongoing needs for equitable supports in the workplace. But they seem to assume that by providing adjustments or developing support plans, the goal was eventually for the person to no longer require supports as would be typical in a workplace." And I think there's an important message in that, because inclusion is not just opening the doors, it's about creating the opportunities. It's also recognising that what someone needs to remain there, to succeed there, and to continue to grow there. And sometimes people who can help us understand that best are the people who have been walking alongside them for the longest time. Before I move into what this means in practice, I want to be really clear about what I'm not saying today. Because whenever we talk about families, informal networks, and relationships, there is a risk that the message gets simplified. And the message is not every sibling should be involved. And it's also not every sibling relationship is positive, and it is definitely not siblings are a replacement for funded providers and services and supports. Sibling relationships are human relationships. And like all human relationships, they are complex. Some siblings are incredibly close, but some siblings aren't. Some siblings want to be actively involved, and some need boundaries. Some people with disability want their sibling deeply connected into their lives, and other people do not. And all of that needs to be respected. A rights-based approach means the person with disability remains at the centre always. But what we need to challenge is the assumption that independence means doing everything alone, because none of us live like that. Most of us make decisions with other people around us. We talk things through, we ask people who know us well, and we get advice from friends, partners, colleagues, parents, and yes, siblings. Having trusted relationships around us does not reduce our independence, and often it strengthens it. The goal is not to make siblings responsible. The goal is to recognise relationships that already exist and ask whether those relationships could help someone achieve the life they want. Because the issue is not that siblings always have the answer. The issue is that too often nobody has asked them the question. So, what can you actually do for your clients after you leave the session? Firstly, I'd like to ask you to think about the people you currently support and their networks. Do you know what those networks actually look like? And I don't mean the paid supports, I mean the people who are there day in, day out, the people who have known them across the different stages of their life, and the people who know them outside of services and systems. Are you utilising those relationships? Have you considered how you might? And what might you be missing because of this blind spot? Secondly, I'd encourage you to think specifically about siblings. Not every person with a disability will have a relationship they want to draw on, and we should never make assumptions about what role a sibling does or should play. But we also shouldn't make the opposite assumption, that because a sibling isn't currently visible in someone's support network doesn't mean they are important. Ask the question, does this person have brothers or sisters, and what does that relationship look like? Are they people who understand this person's goals, interests, and strengths? Are they someone the person with a disability wants involved? And importantly, if siblings are involved, think about what they need too, because strong, informed, and supported siblings are better placed to walk alongside their brother or sister in ways that uphold choice, independence, and self-determination. And thirdly, I want to talk to you about a program that Siblings Australia currently has on offer that can be used in this space. We are currently running a program called Life Changes. Life Changes is funded through the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing and is available for both people with disability and their siblings. Importantly, people do not need to attend as a sibling pair. We run separate streams, one for people with disability and one for adult siblings, recognising that each person has their own experiences, perspectives and skills they are building. Life Changes is about building the skills, knowledge and confidence of people with disability and their siblings to successfully navigate transitional life events. The program uses strengths-based approaches, including supported decision-making, future mapping, and person-centered tools to help people think through change, challenges, and opportunities. For siblings, the workshops explore things like how they can champion and advocate alongside their brother or sister, building skills to navigate challenges and difficult conversations, understanding their own roles and well-being, and creating practical action plans for the future. For people with disability, the workshop focused on things like managing relationships and communication, having conversations about hard things and asking for help, managing emotions during times of stress or change, and building action plans that reflect their own choices and goals. If you're working with someone who you think would benefit from Life Changes, registrations are available through the Siblings Australia website, and we can also work directly with your organisation. If you have a group of people who you support who you think would benefit, please reach out. We can organise a dedicated cohort for your organisation, either online or in person. And I want to finish by bringing us back to where we started, the sibling effect, because today has not just been about saying siblings matter more than anyone else. They don't. It's not about saying siblings should replace professionals, providers, parents, or other supports, and they shouldn't. It's about recognising that every person exists within relationships. And when we fail to see those relationships, we miss part of the picture. For those of you working in employment, you often meet people at a particular moment in their lives, a transition point or a decision point or a moment where they're thinking about what comes next. But siblings may have been there for all of the moments that came before, the first day of school, the friendships, the interests, the things that worked and the things that didn't. The moment where someone surprised everyone, the moment where everyone else underestimated them, and often they will be there for the moments that come afterwards. Because getting the job is not the end goal. The goal is building a life with purpose and a life with connection. A life where people with disability have the same opportunities as everyone else to contribute, to belong, to take risks, to change direction, and to decide who they want to be. And if we want employment pathways that genuinely reflect the whole person, then we need to understand the whole person, their strengths, their goals, their history, their relationships, their people. So my challenge to you after today is a simple one. When you're working with someone alongside with a disability, ask who knows this person, who believes in this person, who sees something possible for this person that the systems might have missed. Because sometimes the most powerful support for someone's future comes from someone who's been beside them all along. Thank you. That is the end of my sharing. Sally and Olivia, I'll have to see whether I can hear you now.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that, Shannon, especially amidst those tech challenges.
Apologies.
As one of, I've got three sisters myself, and it's been lovely to sit here and reflect on the role that they have played in my employment journey in particular. I'm very grateful and aware of the role that they've had in my life as a whole, but yeah, in that sort of narrower context, I'm thinking about some of the times that they have been there, or even some of the times we've had conversations around all of those career dreams I had as a young child that they very quickly but somewhat rightly shot down because they were probably not possible. Yeah, it's been lovely. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
In terms of questions, the main theme that has come up in a couple of questions is around practical steps and whether there's experiences or maybe yeah, anything that you can draw on that might help people in sort of frontline, like those employment consultant kind of roles, that they might be able to draw on when they're engaging with the person with disability to bring the notion of bringing a sibling into the conversation and how they might be able to go about that.
Yeah, sure. And I keep coming back to that main point that it's really it sits with the person with the disability about whether they want their siblings in those discussions. So my first point would very much be about having that conversation about the comfort level of the person with the disability. Not all sibling relationships are good, and we definitely don't sort of stand here as Siblings Australia and assume that siblings are always going to do the right thing, are always going to have their brother or sister's best interests at heart. But if the person who is seeking support does have a positive relationship with their brother or sister and is willing to have them as part of the conversations, I would be saying to those frontline staff, if there's an opportunity to have the conversation with the person with the disability and their brother or sister in the room, try and do that. One of the people I was speaking to in preparing, I spoke to a few adult siblings about their experiences. And there was a gentleman who was telling me about issues he had had, and his brother wasn't able to communicate to the service providers about what the actual barriers were for him in the workplaces that they were describing, and he never actually had an opportunity to be part of those conversations. And he said to me, he's like, I could have really clearly articulated to them, these are the sorts of things he needs, and these are the sorts of things that won't work. And because he understood so much of the context of this person, of his brother's life, because he understood so much of this sort of the underlying subtext of the communication that was happening, he could very clearly state, it's this problem with this particular workplace that we're talking about, or this is the actual modification he needs. And him saying he doesn't want to do it, or he's not interested in that, it's not that he doesn't want to do that particular sort of work, it's just that the way they're describing it isn't working for him. And if they'd had that conversation, then they would have realized that, yeah, okay, it's not actually huge modifications we're talking about here. This person does want this sort of work, they're just not fitting into what the workplace looks like at the moment, and we can make those modifications there. So obviously talking to your client first is number 1, 2, 3 through to 100, and making sure they're comfortable with bringing in those support networks, but where they are comfortable with doing it, recognizing that having those conversations can give you so much more context than you will perhaps ever get from just speaking to one person, I think is really, really important. So that would be my number 1 piece of advice.
Absolutely, thank you. And could you just give us a quick refresher, and we can share these details again after today, just where people could find out a bit more about the Life Changes program that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. There's information on that on our website. So if you go to www.siblingsaustralia.org.au, I am also going to get Liv to pop my direct email address into the chat as well. So if people want to speak to me about that, like I said, we have groups that sort of run as where individuals can, thanks, Liv, where individuals can join with other people. But if there is a provider out there who thinks actually this would be fabulous for my clients, and I would like to have one that just runs as a cohort with just people who know each other, who just people we're working with, we're very happy to facilitate that. And we can talk about whether that's online or in person as best suits the different providers. very happy to do that. As I said, it's also completely funded through the federal government, so there's no cost to providers or participants for involvement in that program.
Fantastic. Thank you. It looks like we've got through the questions. I'm just checking. Yeah. So there are a couple here, but they're all along the that same kind of line of questioning. And I think, yeah, we've got back to all of them. If anyone has any questions post today, please do feel free to reach out either to Liv, myself, or to Shannon, who's very kindly offered her email address there. In closing, I would just really like to thank Shannon for coming along and sharing that knowledge and expertise, but also the Life Changes program that Sibling Effect, Siblings Australia is running. A huge thank you to Liv and everyone in the background who makes all of these sessions work. And say thank you to all of you for coming along and giving up your time today. And we will be back next fortnight with another session, and details of that session, plus all of the resources, links and information today will be made available to you very soon. But until then, thank you and have a lovely rest of your day.